one morning sweating and panting, and I realized I had a dream that I was sitting at my desktop computer and I had Bitcoin up to 20,000 or something like that, and it started tanking. And I knew that it was just going to keep diving down. And I was going to make the trade on my computer, but my hand could not really use my mouse properly. I had like rubbery hands, and every icon that I clicked on my desktop would not open. So I could not make the trade. I was so nervous and so anxious. I was sweating. I was to the point of tears, to be honest with you. And thank God I woke up.
Welcome to Women Take Stock. This week, we're talking all about volatility, and just like Dana's dream, the market can dive and jump, and it can feel like we have no control over it. It's like a bull and a bear having a fight up and down and all over the place. Do you want to try to get in there before they can find some peace? Maybe, maybe not. But these days, with the market swinging like a gorilla on a tire hanging from a tree at the zoo, it's definitely a question we want to explore.
Yeah, because as a beginning investor, it can be hard to look at those jagged up and down graphs and know whether to buy, sell, or hold. And also, how does day-to-day volatility factor into the market movement as a whole, whether it's a beastly bear or an aggressive bull?
What's with these very masculine analogies?
I know, like, why not have something like a gazelle, something a little bit, fast and elegant instead of this nasty, smelly bull?
What's the background of bulls and bears?
Yeah, that's a good question.
We're going to get to that. I actually did some research, and there's a pretty interesting backstory behind those terms. We'll get to that later. But first, let's start our show.
We are four friends all at different places in our financial and personal lives, looking to pull back the curtain on the seemingly mysterious, often testosterone-driven world of stock investing.
And if four women without business degrees can figure out the market as a side hustle, so can you.
Join us as we learn the basics, buy, sell, scratch our heads, hold our breath, commiserate, and celebrate, hopefully more of the latter. We aren't experts, so please note that this podcast is for general information purposes only.
Yeah, anything resembling financial advice is purely coincidental.
That said, we are hoping to make a little or a lot of money doing this. And if money is power, we want some of that too.
Okay, so welcome to our show. It's not a surprise that this year the market has taken investors for a bumpy ride. It is 2020 after all, at least while we're recording this. Hopefully we get to 2021.
Woo!
In July, it had the fastest 30% drop in history. And now it's back up to kind of nosebleeding heights, but who knows, tomorrow it could tank. It's volatile. So what's an investor, especially a new investor like us, what are we supposed to do? So first to start, can we define what volatility actually is? JJ, why don't you fill us in? What is volatility?
Well, volatility, this is a term that I've heard over the years, but it was only in researching for this podcast that I became aware that volatility and risk are really two different things. Volatility is the up and down movements that a stock price will make over the course of, of course, months, but days, hours, even minutes. So that up and down jaggedy line we see on graphs, that's volatility. And there are lots of reasons for that. And risk is what you experience over the long term of a stock based on whether you think the value of that company and the value of the stock will rise or fall. Assessing those two things, it's actually different depending on whether you're wanting to be in a stock for a short time and maybe take advantage of volatility, it's rising or falling, or if you want to invest in a stock, almost more investing in the company because you think its long-term prospects are awesome.
Oh, that's an interesting way of thinking about it. One thing that was sort of eye-opening for me is that when you hear the word volatile, you think negative. But in fact, depending again on what kind of investor you are, if you're somebody who's day trading or just short-term trading, volatility could actually be really good for you if you know how to work it. And I think that's when we're really advanced investors, we're going to be able to ride that storm. Right now, certainly for me as a newbie investor, I want to be careful not to be responding to that crazy roller coaster that we're seeing.
But Jen, we need to know how to respond to that roller coaster, like it or not. Whether that means we sell, we hold, we go do some more research.
The other thing I would add is volatility is a constant. And it depends on so many things in our world that you don't have control over. So a company reporting a scandal or uncertainty, political uncertainty, hello, 2020. So I think maybe to just expect a certain amount of volatility and then decide how you as an investor want to invest within that constant.
Also, it's pretty interesting that it's changed a lot now that it's so much easier for individual investors to get in and to manage their accounts and to make quick trades, that things can become even more volatile. We had the biggest trading day recently with that extreme volatility after the news of the vaccine. People were having trouble accessing their online trading accounts.
That's right.
And that was because all these individuals getting in. So it's not even just the big funds trying to get in and sell. It's also a bunch of
People like us.
The sheeple.
The sheeple. I'm totally a sheeple. Oh my God.
But you think about that, and that's one of the reasons why things like what's happening in the news or scandals or whatnot can have such a big effect, because everyone kind of reacts. And if they can trade immediately, that has a knock-on effect on the market.
Right, which, kind of brings us back to the episode we did with Frank Murtha about psychology, which is the most fascinating thing really to me about this whole game, if you want to call it a game. At its core, you think investing is really about whether or not a company is any good, but it's also really about how completely bonkers people are.
And whether people think a company is good, whether or not the company is actually good. It's about the perception sometimes and not the reality.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about how fake news can affect how people perceive something in the news media and how that is a domino effect in the stock market.
And that's becoming more and more prevalent.
Ugh, I don't want to think about fake news. It's so depressing. Can we just...
I know.
So Dana, as somebody who's been at this a little bit longer, who's doing pretty well, I think, still this week.
Yeah, this week was a really good week.
How do you keep your sanity, and how do you, maybe that's a different question entirely. It has nothing to do with investing. But it's like, there's volatility, there's risk. And so there are things that people can do to kind of cushion all of that.
Well, I tamp my risk by feeling really secure about whatever I invest in. So I do my research. I don't invest in penny stocks, for example. I invest in things that I think are solid companies because I know in the back of my mind, even if they go down, they'll eventually go up. Fingers crossed.
So even if there's volatility, it'll even out at some point.
JJ was talking about the volatility of the stock graphs. And even if those go up, even if those are on an incline, you still will always see this up and down, up and down, up and down. But in terms of keeping my sanity, I think there are some days where I feel really strongly that I need to keep checking my stocks and I need to be on top of them and be ready to sell in an instant. Or there are days where I don't even want to look. I want to step away. I know the market's going crazy. So I'll do things like set stop losses and stop limits, which...
Ooh. Those are new terms to us and to most beginning investors. Jen, I think you looked up a definition, right?
Yep, I did. I looked it up. A stop loss order specifies that a stock will be bought or sold when it reaches a specified price known as the stop. So when you're talking about a stop loss or limit, you're basically setting a price for when something should be bought or sold. You can even automate it. Dana, can you give us an example?
Okay. So for example, on November 6th, Zoom was at $4.99 and it was going up because a few days before that, it was only at $4.49. But for whatever reason, I'm feeling a little anxious in the market. I decide, you know what, just in case it starts to go down, I'm going to set a stop limit at a specified price. I don't want to lose more than $10 a share. So I'm going to set that for $4.89 on November 6th. So lo and behold, Zoom tanks later in the day on November 9th to $4.21. So if I set my stop limit at, what did I just say, $4.80 or so, then I wouldn't have lost that additional like $60. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you're selling
Getting
that
out before
stock, you're getting out and you're taking a little bit of a loss, but you've assessed that you're willing to take loss up to that point. But anything further than that, you're like, forget it.
And then if the stock keeps going up, the order is not executed. And then you can either go out and cancel it, or you can actually set a time or a date when it closes out.
Oh.
So that's what's so cool. It's like you can actually automate all of this.
It's also an insurance policy.
This sounds all very complicated for the newbie, but this is all to say that this is just one of many ways you can mitigate your risk in a volatile market.
That goes back to kind of knowing what you want, right? Assessing so I bought Zoom and then I didn't buy it at $4.99, but I bought it not at the lowest price it's gotten to recently. And it was demoralizing to see it keep dropping and dropping and dropping. And I thought, oh no, I'm one of those people. And then it's going to just go to zero and be awful. But actually, it won't go to zero. It won't go to zero. But in terms of volatility, Dana, speaking to your point about how you kind of manage that feeling anxiety, how you deal with volatility in your own portfolio, I thought, the reasons I bought that, those haven't changed. I actually think that all these things coming up for that company based on actual research, not what everybody else is buying in the market. And so I'm going to hold on to it. I'm not going to sell and realize those losses because I think it'll come back up. And now it is above where I bought it at anyway. So if I were to sell it, I'd already make some money on it.
And I love what you just said, how the reasons you bought the stock to begin with have not changed. It's a good company, you believe in it, you see future growth, you've done your research, and your plan is to hold on to this profitable stock, and it will eventually go back up, more likely than not. So sticking with your plan is a great approach.
And especially because we're emotional creatures. People are emotional creatures and you react.
And then that comes into play when you're making a trade or you're deciding if you buy or sell a stock. Sometimes you have to look at yourself and think, okay, what kind of mood am I in today? Did I get a good night's sleep last night? And making a deal with yourself. Okay, wait, I had 2 hours of sleep last night for some reason or another. I'm probably not in a great decision-making mode right now. So really adding that as like a third level of consideration takes a lot of, strength or just understanding who you are as an investor.
Right? You know what I love what we're doing is having people to check in with. Again, not necessarily financial advisors, but simply friends who know what you're doing, friends who are your investing friends. And you can say, hey, I know this sounds crazy, but I think I might want to buy this stock. And then Tula can tell me that you're being completely insane and talk me off that ledge. And we can have a little conversation about it like we do all week long on WhatsApp, which is why Dana is responsible for all of us buying Bitcoin, even though we don't really understand it yet. But yet.
And talking about volatility and this idea of how do you manage your fears surrounding that is, check in with people and help keep your sanity by being in conversation with people so that you're not just emotionally reacting in the moment. You're actually thinking it through. Maybe I should hold on to this, even though the Zoom stock is dipping because we're on Zoom right now. And we would tell you, JJ, Zoom is going to be around. Don't let go of that.
So speaking of stocks going up and down, back to what we were saying earlier, what does this have to do with the bulls and the bears that we started with? So one means the market is going up and the other means it's going down, right? And where do those animal analogies come from?
Oh, Tula, I am so glad you asked. I am just so glad because, as you know, I'm a writer in my, most of us are writers, but I love words. And I was like, what is that? What's a bear and what's a bull? Really simply put, there's this jargon in stock market trading that a bull is someone who buys securities or commodities in the expectation of a price rise, or someone whose actions make such a price rise happen. A bear is the opposite, someone who sells in the expectation of a price decline.
So that's basically a pessimist and an optimist.
Right? A bull market is a market going up and up and up, which makes folks eager to get in on it. And a bear market is not a good thing. It's the opposite. It's going down.
Is there an easy way to remember?
Well, I struggled with this for ages. I used to have to look it up all the time, even in my job at a financial news website. And until I read something recently, it's basically you think of a bull and it scoops up with its horns. So that's going up, and a bear swats down like a bear eating salmon, swats the salmon out of the...
Oh my God. So no, every time I think of a bear market, I'm just going to think of weird mushy
bear going into hibernation.
Flesh flying.
How about a bear going into hibernation? So a bear going down.
Yes.
That's such a better way of thinking about it, Dana, than pink flesh flying all over the place. I actually...
One thing's for sure we'll never forget now because of ridiculous conversation we just had about it.
No, but I love those. I love both of those visuals. It helps me immediately contextualizes it for me.
But there's actually better contextualization, which is history.
Ooh.
I did a little research and found out that etymologists point to a proverb warning that it is not wise to, quote, sell the bear skin before one has caught the bear. Okay, so that doesn't really make sense to me, but apparently back when people were buying and selling animal skins more regularly, there were some shady middlemen in the bear skin trade who were called bearskin jobbers, or bears for short. And they would sell bear skins that they didn't even have yet, speculating on the price they would need to pay the trappers. And of course, they would overestimate the bear skin's worth So they would make a profit on the difference. So I guess instead of don't count your chickens before they hatch, people back in, I guess, the 16th century said, don't sell the bear's skin before you caught him. Does this make sense?
Yeah,
Not
because
at all, but I appreciate the historical context.
no, because the idea is you're selling. You want to get rid of it.
You want to get rid of the bear skin
And make money from it.
and make money from it. The whole point of everything is to make money from it.
What about love?
What is love?
We can't trade on that, JJ. Okay, none of this really makes actually that much sense to me, except that apparently there was this big speculation that kind of blew up in everybody's face. And somehow in the middle of this, the term bear caught on. It's like some traders really lost their shirts when things went down.
They lost their pelts.
They lost their pelts.
Good research. I give you an A+ for research, Jen.
Yeah.
Thanks. I tried. And speaking of research,
Sorry,
JJ.
I do have one thing that I'd just like to say. This idea of volatility is really interesting, that it can work for small individual investors. I talked to my sister-in-law this past week, and her brother has got into some small Canadian marijuana stocks.
Yay!
But because he follows them very closely and he's bought quite a number, he's gotten in, they've gone up, and then he still believes in the company. But when he feels that there's some volatility and there's some news that is driving the price maybe a bit too high for the value of the company, he sells, and then it's come down, and then he's bought back in, and then it's not more than once.
I did a Bitcoin last week. I wanted to take the gains, and I thought this is not going to keep going up. So I took the gains and then went right back in when I started doing more research and purchased at just a little bit of a lower price, but not that much to make a difference.
I love that, because then you're getting the best of both worlds. You don't feel like you're missing out on making the profit, but then you're also getting back in case it goes up again.
To be honest, this is where I want to get to. I want to get to a place where I feel comfortable short-term investing, buying and selling in a sort of more rapid clip, because I do have some long-term investments that quite honestly, I just simply don't look at. I just accept there's a financial planner who's looking at my retirement funds, and every 4 months I talk to him and say, okay, we're doing okay. And he says, yeah. And I said, okay, bye. Because now, up until recently, I never understood a thing he said, and I'm understanding it more. And I will tell you, actually, one little aside is I spoke to him the other day because I had some cash sitting around and he wanted to put it somewhere. And he knows me historically as being somebody who's really risk adverse. And he said, I was thinking of putting in these bond funds, and they're going to, I don't know, some really low percentage, some really low risk funds. And I said, you know what? Take some of that. And why don't we get a little bit crazier? And he's like, really? And I'm like, yeah, I'm okay with it. But a tiny little
bit.
That's so
interesting, because now that you understand more and you educated yourself, you're willing to take a little more risk because you understand the market better.
Exactly.
And you're able to make a decision, not fear-based. It's an education.
And I actually understood a little bit about what he was telling me about what he was thinking of doing with that money, which is a very different thing than what I'm trying to do while I'm learning with you guys, which is literally getting into specific companies, understanding what's happening with those companies, and understanding when to buy and sell that stock. So I'd love to hear from you all briefly how your week was. So Dana, you were just saying you actually sold some of your Bitcoin, and then you bought it again and you made a little money there. So what else happened? It was a good week for everybody, I think.
Yeah, Bitcoin was great. Bitcoin just skyrocketed. I think when I originally purchased it was at about 12K, and it's gone up to, right now it's at 18,938, which is just amazing. Granted, one Bitcoin and one share of Bitcoin is actually that price. So that's a lot, but you can buy fractional shares and still reap the reward of this increasing digital currency, which is, it's super fascinating. All of the different entities that are getting into it at this point, including PayPal and Square and our own government. A couple of other stocks of mine that have done really well are related to electric vehicles, NIO in China, and BYD, which produces the batteries for electric vehicles. So I felt really happy about my week. And I didn't do a lot of selling and buying. I actually watched my stocks this week, partially because I was very busy and didn't want to be distracted by worrying about buying and selling, but I was also feeling comfortable about what I'm invested in this particular week.
That's so cool. JJ, what about you across the pond?
Well, right now based across the pond, but still investing in the US. So all week I had half of my portfolio going up and 2 stocks dragging it down. These were Zoom and a gaming stock.
Do you think that was because of the vaccine announcements and getting closer to distribution?
Absolutely. And yeah, I thought it was actually a really knee-jerk reaction of the market to turn around and say, oh, no one's going to be gaming anymore because everyone's going to be going out.
Have they met my child?
Well, and also you have a whole group of people who never did gaming before, but I mean, it continues to become more mainstream and not just for kind of young kids or 20 somethings who sit in their dorm rooms all day.
Well, AOC is big in the gaming world too.
Yes,
so
she is.
She's actually made some inroads in my family who have a different opinion of her now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's amazing. Because she's a gamer, not because of her political platforms.
That's hilarious. But because our shows are evergreen, I just want to give it a little historical context that right now we're talking, it's a time in history. This is the week that the vaccines, it was announced that the vaccines, 2 of the vaccines were potentially 95% effective and could be starting to hit the market in a little bit of time. And we're also at a time in history when Trump is not said he isn't president, will not concede the election, but Biden is moving forward as the president-elect. And so there's a lot of weird stuff going on. But I do think that this vaccine, we've read it everywhere, that the vaccines have made a pretty big mark on the week.
What's interesting about that is I bought some Pfizer stock when we started this podcast. And so I saw the spike when they first announced that their vaccine was 90% effective. And then later in the week, they announced that they were applying for emergency use from the FDA. And I was like, oh, great, it's going to go even higher. And it didn't. So I'm still a newbie when it comes to figuring out how the news is going to affect.
I'm going to jump in there to it.
Yeah.
Very interesting. With all of the news of the pharmaceutical stocks, I kept checking back on them. And I was curious, why are they not jumping? Because a few months ago, when they were announcing like Kodak and Pfizer and all the other pharmaceutical companies, the market would react in a flash. And I'm wondering, is there some sort of market exhaustion or...
Oh, Dana, that's so interesting.
People are just tired of hearing about it, so they're not going to react anymore. They don't really buy into it.
What I find interesting, though, beyond the pharmaceutical stocks is for my own little portfolio, which right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
I like to use like a little voice, a little diminutive.
I have 11 stocks.
Portfolio.
So I have 11 stocks in my Robinhood account.
Oh, question. What's the maximum number of shares you have in any one stock?
Good question.
I have my biggest holding is with FCEL, Fuel Cell Energy. And I have to say that has definitely been one of my best performing stocks.
How many shares do you have?
I have 19 shares.
Ooh.
Yeah. And that one, I mean, goodness, when did I buy that? I don't remember when I bought it exactly. It was a few weeks ago. That in the past month, I am so proud of myself. That is up almost 25% in a month.
Oh. Jen, what made you get into that?
I want to buy into things that I believe in. And one of the things I believe in is sustainable, renewable energy sources. I don't really know much about fuel cell technology, but I know that it's not petroleum gas. So that seems interesting to me. I don't remember specifically why I fell on that particular stock. I'm sure I read some articles about it and it looked kind of cool.
That's the free stock that I think I got from my first, my free stock when I opened my Robinhood account.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I thought a lot about it. I didn't stick with it though. And I think it's smart that you did.
Well, I have to say, Jen, us talking about fuel cell technology, I bought into some, but not that company. I do think it's probably worth looking at the news because there was a lot of talk this week from analysts saying this stock increased more than they thought it would based on the company fundamentals. Maybe a time to do some profit taking on your part. I don't know.
Oh, interesting.
What are you saying the stock is
Again,
overvalued?
anything resembling a real tip is purely coincidental, but I might look at that.
That is not financial advice by any means.
Yeah. And speaking of not financial advice, just to, remember a few weeks ago, I had the stock picks decided by my tarot deck. And I just want to report back that right now, my Virgin Galactic holding, well, it wasn't doing great yesterday, but over the course of last week, it was up almost 15%. And it's one of my best performing stocks. And again, that was chosen not by me, not by experts, but by, tarot roll of the dice. So it is all still a little bit, kind of wacky.
It is pretty wacky. Can I segue into the first trading dream, or rather nightmare, that I had the other day?
Like an actual nightmare.
This was actually a nightmare that I had. I woke up one morning, sweating and panting, and I realized I had a dream that I was sitting at my desktop computer and I had Bitcoin up to like 20,000 or something like that. And it started tanking. And I knew, for whatever reason, based on research and the information out there, that it was just going to keep diving down to like 5,000. And I was going to make the trade on my computer, but my hand could not really use my mouse properly. I had like rubbery hands, and every icon that I clicked on my desktop would not open Robinhood. So I could not make the trade. I was so nervous and so anxious. I was sweating. I was to the point of tears, to be honest with you. And thank God I woke up.
You wake up and grab your phone and you're like, ah,
I was like, thank God.
it works. It works.
But it was my first trading nightmare. So
your subconscious is trying to process the stress you're feeling. So even if it's exciting, it can be stressful.
Right. A little bit of a reminder that I better, I just got to be careful, don't get too excited, because to your point, Tula, it's pretty exciting to watch when a stock just is going up, 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 and up, and everybody's saying it's going to keep going up. Look at all the potential. But at the same time, you really never know. You really never know.
And we are going to help our listeners know more about cryptocurrency in an upcoming episode.
I am so excited about that, I have to say, because of all the things that I knew nothing about, which is, vast, this is one of the things I'm really getting excited to know more about. And I'm still really struggling with understanding what the hell it is. So few women are involved in it. And in terms of correcting the investment gap, we need, as women, to get more women involved in this, because it's clearly a growth market that yet we don't fully understand.
There'll be lots to explore there.
Okay, I think it's time for our quiz of the week. I'm going to drop a little knowledge here for everybody. Okay, this is a true-false quiz. In stocks, the term that describes the price volatility is beta.
Wait, what?
Say that again?
I'll say it one more time. True or false? In stocks, the term that describes price volatility is called beta.
Beta? Is it like alpha, beta?
Yeah, like alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, zeta, eta.
Wouldn't alpha be the...
Well, doesn't beta mean something new, or like a pre-release version or something?
Oh, like us.
Yeah.
It does. It does.
Well, if it's describing us, I would say true. We are so beta.
I'm going to say true. No, I'm going to say true. Yeah, I think that's true.
I would say false. Yeah, because as a term, beta has so many uses as a term.
Well, Jen and Dana are correct. JJ, you are wrong. I'm sorry to say, although I like your reasoning. It is true. Beta is a quantitative measure of the variability when compared with the market as a whole. So in analyses, beta will compare the changes in a stock's price against the changes in the S&P 500. So if a stock has a beta of 2, that means it varies twice as much as the S&P 500.
So interesting.
Yeah, so that stock can be expected to rise in price by 40% if the S&P 500 rises by 20% or drop. So there is, when you're doing your research, there is that number that you can look at to check stock's volatility. I don't know enough to know how you should measure that and whether you should purchase or not purchase the stock, but there is something quantitative that I think advanced investors look at.
I'd be curious to learn why they chose the letter.
Maybe because alpha was taken for something else and they were going through the alphabet.
I love that so much of our show is like, well, I don't really know. But this is sort of the point, I guess. Each episode, we know a little bit more. And so hopefully our listeners are also learning as we do. That's the entire idea here. So in the interest of summing up this whole volatility thing, what did we learn today, students?
The only thing that's constant about volatility is that it's a constant.
Yeah, I mean, but it's true. I mean, isn't there some, what is the adage about the only constant is change,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
and that's the same thing in the market as
Yeah.
well. Despite all of the calculations and the graphs and all the experts, it's still the only constant is volatility. There you go.
And actually, we're thankful for it. That's the whole point of the stock market, right? Is that things need to be changing and moving and
Yeah, otherwise you don't make any money. I would highly encourage any listeners to please contact us through our website, womentakes. Can I even say the name of our? You know what? Somebody else tell us how people can get in touch with us.
You can get in touch with us via our website, womentakestock.com, or on social media, Women Take Stock on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Oh, I don't know if we're on Facebook.
Maybe Facebook someday.
We're going to get there soon. So yeah, let us know what you want to know and we will grapple with it with you. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think so. All right, then we're out, ladies. Women, we're out, women.
okay.